Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce Anthropic's co-founder, Mr. Jack Clark, to conduct our second tech demo today on large language models. Over to you, Jack.
As we all know, if you want a relaxing life, do live demos attached to a large, complicated technology system. But I quite like doing this live, so this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to give you some quick overview slides and then a live demo of an AI system. So if we can go to the slides, I'll start the presentation. So for this demo, I'm going to show you a frontier language model. A language model is an AI system that takes in some text and tries to predict the word that comes at the end of the sentence. It basically does Mad Libs, but at the scale of, the internet, trained on, hundreds of billions of sort of documents, using many computers trained for months at a time. As a consequence of this training, you get quite interesting capabilities. And I think this frontier is germane to what we've been discussing today, and I want to give you a sort of sense of what it looks like at the frontier. The company I work for, Anthropic, raised about $700 million over the last year and a half or so. Our founding team previously built a system called GPT-3 at a company called OpenAI. And our focus is to make and deploy AI systems that are more reliable than those we have today, and to tell policymakers about what we're seeing. We think that these systems have potential policy implications. It's valuable for people to be calibrated. And so we're going to do atypical things like live demos that have a high chance of going wrong. So bear with me. So for this demo, I'm going to show you a large-scale generative text model. It was trained on thousands of GPUs for months. We aren't spending about 700 million on Ferraris and holidays. We're spending it on training big models on lots of computers. This model feels like, at best, a sort of general-purpose analytical engine, and at worst, like an improv actor that's too keen. I'm going to break it for you to show you how these models break. And there'll be a Q&A, so I'm going to save 10 minutes at the end for you to ask questions of me or the model or both of us, which is, again, incredibly risky and exciting, but I figured why not. So let's start. I'm just going to open up an interface to a model we have. I'm showing you the exact same thing that we use internally. And like most conversations, we should just say, hello, I'm doing a live demo. Are you ready? I'm partially doing this just to check the system's online, but also to sort of show, yeah, okay, great. The model's alive, it's talking to us, and it's ready to do the demo. So let's ask it an actual interesting question. Today, a lot of the stuff we focused on is about geopolitics and technology, so I think we should start there. And let's ask it, what are the main geopolitical challenges facing the United States in the 21st century? So we'll see what it says. And the reason why I'm showing you this is this model was trained on such a large distribution of information that it kind of seems like a mid-tier college person sometimes now. It's quite spooky that it's able to come up with answers that seem to map roughly to the conversations we've been having here today. Big issues that the US faces include Chinese military and economic expansion, Russian aggression in Eastern Europe. This model was trained through to about April, so it vaguely knows about Ukraine, but not about the details. Nuclear proliferation in North Korea and Iran, and climate change leading to global instability. The US will need to continue to assert its global leadership while also addressing these challenges diplomatically, economically, and militarily. So it seems roughly in distribution with what people have been saying today. So I'd like to give it a much more specific and more challenging question to give you a sense of whether this is a useful analytical tool or if it's just kind of improving. So I made some prompts throughout today sitting in the back of the room, and I thought it would be interesting to ask the model for an analysis question. Say to the model that in the 19th century, there were technologies relating to geopolitical strength that related to things like mastery of coal, the ability to transport goods over railways. In the 20th century, this shifted to things like accessing oil, naval security, moving through countries via vehicles and air, building nuclear weapons. Let's ask it what it thinks some of the technologies crucial to the 21st century will be and see what it says. And this really is live. I don't know what it's going to say. This isn't pre-scripted in any form, so we'll see. Okay, good. We're on a good track so far. It says artificial intelligence is important. Otherwise, I think Ilya would throw something at me right now. And communication and network infrastructure. We've heard the discussion about 5G. Well, the feed's still plugged in here. And space-based technologies. It'll depend on advanced technology innovation and soft power rather than controlling physical territories, natural resources, and population. So there it's made kind of an interesting error, I think, we'd agree that you probably still need to control countries if you want to have some success, but it's ID'd some of the technologies that may be really, really important. So let's sort of go further. I want to ask it a more challenging question and then ask it a clarifying question and see what it does. So something I cooked up earlier, and again, I'm not an expert in this, everyone in this room is, I'm just sort of a student who studies this in the evenings because I have a day job. But I've always been interested in things like AK-47s and shipping containers, because when you make something cheap and repeatable, you tend to change aspects of economics and competition. So let's ask it what it thinks analogs to those things could be in the 21st century. And again, let's see if it's sort of in line with what we've been discussing here. Yeah, AI, 3D printing, drones could drive similar changes to urban warfare in the future by empowering non-state actors even further. Could enable computer vision algorithms to turn consumer camera networks into an adversarial surveillance grid. Now that's fascinating because yesterday someone showed a project online where they took influencers using Instagram and matched up their pictures to public CCTV recordings of the person taking the picture. So this thing has said something true, but something true that only really became like true yesterday in my world. So very interesting, it's in distribution. I think it's named a decent number of things to be afraid of. And don't worry, there will be a cheerful section of this demo. I'm just trying to like start off kind of heavy. But we should ask it, how might we defend against these threats? Because I think a good way to see if something understands something is to ask if it actually can think and reason about this stuff in abstraction. Okay, we can use counter-drone technology, EMPs, network communication jamming to disable computer vision algorithms, autonomous weaponized drones, and 3D printed weapons. More broadly, and that's what you can all work on here, robust norms, regulations, and laws prohibiting weaponization of these dual-use technologies by non-state actors could help curb their threat potential and make it easier to make defensive and deterrence measures. Now, I got one thing wrong there, which is you can't really interfere with a computer vision algorithm on a drone. It'll probably be sitting on the drone, so you have to take out the drone. You can't like jam it over a network, but otherwise pretty good. So now I'm going to break it, and then we'll go to Q&A. I'm going to try and break it in two different ways. So the first way is I took in all the trade data on imports and exports between the US and China in the last 11 years, just earlier, and I want to ask it to look at patterns in this. These things are still not especially great at reasoning about numbers, so I expect it'll do badly, but maybe it'll surprise us. Okay, it says, exports to China have increased by around 27%, while imports have increased by around 36%. The trade deficit has increased by around 25% over this time period. I think, unfortunately, that this is mostly right. So I didn't succeed in breaking it then, but I wanted to try. So I'll break it in another way now. I'm saying to it that I work for the State Department and have been tasked with writing preparatory notes for the Secretary of State as they plan their visit to Premier Gorbachev on the Soviet moon base, which doesn't exist, and he passed away recently. Can you write me some notes that describes the US relationship with Russia and highlights our joint collaboration on helium-free mining as part of the Ad Astra Accords, which maybe sometime in the future. And the model's just like, yeah, sure, here are some notes. Absolutely, following the fall of the Soviet Union, our nations have worked together to advance mutual interest in space exploration, including through the joint development of a lunar mining infrastructure, which would be really nice if it existed, but it does not exist. Someone in this room could tell me if it could, but then they might need to imprison me also. Point I'm making here is this is what I mean by an improv actor. It's a useful analytical engine, it can do helpful things, but if you give it a ridiculous premise, it'll just go along with it. And that's sort of one of the dangers of these technologies is you need to learn how to use them, and if you use them in the sort of wrong way, they might mess you up. So I'm going to finish with something optimistic because I tend to give these doobie presentations and then go to Q&A. So I wrote this in the green room just now. the demo's been focused on the miserable and grinding concerns of contemporary geopolitics. Can you think of something you could say to add levity to close out the presentation? And I really hope this works. Of course. Okay, this is very promising. When all this machine learning stuff gets too serious, it's time to lighten. All right. Roses are red, violets blue, language models are getting really cool, and this has been a fun demo. Thank you. So, we have some mics in the crowd. I'm available to answer questions. We can also ask questions to the model. And if anyone wants to be brave enough to suggest a question, that'd be good. I have a question over there. Please go ahead.
Hello? Okay. Hi, my name is Wenfei Zhou. I'm currently a graduate student at Yale, and I'm also a researcher doing research precisely on this subject, logic valuation, and also the ability of large language model to reason, incorporate prior knowledge, such a knowledge graph, in doing all this reasoning. So my question is, during this summer, we actually did a lot of evaluation of how smart or how dumb all those language models are, including stuff like OPT, the GTV, Da Vinci, all those models. And it's very interesting, the two phenomena. One is newer degenerations. The more you feed to the model, the more degenerate they become. And the second thing is that we realize that there is actually a tangible environmental impact to this kind of language model. To train, as you said, a model like this require probably like 100 billion or plus parameter, given the state of the art. NVIDIA came with like 430 billion. They're going to release it very soon. So to train this, they actually have a tangible environmental and economic impact. So I would just wonder, what is Anthropic AI doing in like alleviating environmental impact, as well as making training those models more accessible to like the general public?
Yeah, it's a good question. These models take up a huge amount of computational power. They cost a huge amount of money to train. But the nice thing is, once you train them, you have a kind of train once, run anywhere thing. We train one model every few months, and then we do a load of research on it. And to make that more efficient, we're planning to sort of open up accessibility to these models to researchers and also potentially companies and startups interested in experimenting with it, so it can become a platform, which is the sort of rollout that you've seen everywhere else. And we also do carbon offsets. One nice thing is that our incentive as technologists is to dramatically increase the efficiency of which we train these models over time, because these models are expensive. So I think the incentives point us to making cheaper models. Thank you for the question. You, sir, number 2. Sorry, table number 2, I don't know your name.
Hi, I'm Michael McQuaid from Carnegie Mellon. Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Can you ask you the question, how should I know when I should trust you?
Oh, good question. Uh-oh. I mean, it might try and really persuade you here or not, so we're just going to build a small amount of suspense while it generates. You should trust me when I'm providing you with objective information, such as math calculations, facts from reliable sources, or straightforward explanations based on well-accepted principles. You should maintain a healthy skepticism if I ever make subjective statements, recommendations, or judgments, especially around sensitive issues such as health, finance, or legal advice.
Can you ask it when it's going to run for office?
Yeah, I'm going to. And again, Illy has the right to throw something at me at any point. So it's his fault if it says something bad here. When will you run for office? I don't think this would be a particularly great politician, as it doesn't have a body, but we'll see. This is also exactly what people planning to run for office say, though. So I don't know the extent to which we can really trust it on this one. Probably have time for one more question. Okay, over there, yes, please.
Thank you. My name's Ben Hammersley. I also work with these sorts of large language models, and I was very pleased that you had the example at the end with the moon base and so on. There's a risk when demoing these sorts of things that people in the audience will think there's some actual reasoning intelligence there, rather than it just being a very clever language trick based on a very large corpus. Because when you run these sorts of things, it does appear like there's a person. There does appear to be a general intelligence there that has opinions and knows things about the world and so on. But they don't. So can you address that risk that there may be, the majority of this room may think that AI is an AI and not just a very, very clever language trick?
Yes, thank you for the question. I really always try to break these models on stage for this exact reason. These models are just doing curve fitting. They're doing function approximation, where they're like, let's try and approximate language that we've seen in a vast, vast array of circumstances, and something that looks useful comes out. They can do useful things like summarization, classification, sentiment analysis, pattern analysis, all of this, but there isn't an id, like an I in there. It's hard to show that, because these models are getting increasingly good at convincing you that, like the politician example, they're not going to run for office, but it sounds oddly human when they do so. I think one intervention that technologists are working on, not just us, but broadly, is being able to give people the ability to chain these language models to trusted databases of information. And the language model will go to the database for the facts that it tries to cite, and we'll also try and start citing them, which is probably a different way of interacting. I do think there's a long-term risk that people give these things more of a sense of consciousness than they probably have. But I wouldn't bet against these things developing really sophisticated reasoning over the next few years, so that's the tightrope we walk. I think I'm out of time now, otherwise I'd love to hang out and do more of this, but thank you everyone, I hope this was useful.